Hello, Ken. This is Greg. It's February the 7th, the year 2022. Cover chapter, what chapter is it? Is it 19 or 20? Whichever chapter it is in the book today. Let me figure it out. I can tell you momentarily. Anyway, it's the one that Tom Robinson gives it's chapter 19. He gives his testimony as to what happened on that November day as he passed the Ewell's house. All right, interesting chapter. My kids really got into this today quite a bit, and we discussed quite a few things. I wish I'd have recorded them because they had some really good things to say. But just point number one up there, this is the rebuttal story to the Ewells, to Bob Ewell and to Mayella Ewell. This is the rebuttal testimony to what they had to say. And so the jury, as I said up here, the jury, this is Tom Robinson versus the Ewells, the jury is now forced to make a decision, going to have to make a decision who they believe. Do they believe the Ewells or do they believe Tom Robinson? The same way for us as readers, we're put in a position now where we have to decide as well. Do we believe the Ewells or do we believe Tom Robinson? My kids all agreed today the Ewells are unlikable people, and as such, it's hard to believe that they would give testimony that could be believed. At the same time, they like Tom Robinson, but again, they don't like Bob Ewell, they don't like Mayella Ewell. And as some of the kids said in class, Mayella, she got tripped up a number of times, had to change her story and whatnot. I asked them this question before we began reading the chapter. I said, why would Mayella and Bob Ewell make up this story about Tom Robinson? What would be their motivation behind it? Why could they possibly be doing it? And the answer is found later in the chapter. And I felt really good about a couple of my kids. A couple of my kids didn't figure it out at this moment, but as we got into the chapter a little bit before it was revealed, a couple of them figured it out. They did a good job of figuring out. Back to this point number one that I made up there, who's the jury going to believe, Tom Robinson or the Ewells? Well, we already know that answer. Atticus Finch already knows that answer. What did he tell Scout? He said, no hope, no way. I mean, we're going to lose. He knew before he started that it was a lost cause to win at this jury trial there in Macomb. Again, he had hopes, he had ideas and hopes that they could win on appeal at a higher court that's moved out of Macomb, goes up the judicial chain. And so he really had strong hopes there. But he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was not going to win. Why? I'll take you back to something that I've got here. I'm sure you'll remember it. What was the class structure in Macomb County? Of course, you had the upper, middle, and lower class. These were all whites, and then you had the blacks below them. And as I said down in these two statements, at no time would a white person allow himself or herself to allow a black person to be considered equal with them. And the same token, a white person would never put themselves in a position where they could a black person could construe, hey, he's an equal with me. I'm an equal with him. And so again, this is I know this is review. But this is why Atticus knew from the very beginning he was going to lose. There was no way he was going to win in a trial and make him with Tom Robinson as the defendant. At no time would the word of a black person ever be taken over the word of a white person. I'm talking about in court now, in trial. But at no time would ever a black person's word be taken over a white person's word. In this trial, you have Tom Robinson, he's the black man giving his testimony, but you have two whites, both Bob Ewell and Mayella Ewell. And regardless of how awful their testimony is, and regardless of how obvious it was that they were lying, and my kids all agreed, 100% of them said the Ewells are lying. This is before we even got to Tom Robinson's testimony today. The Yules are not believable characters. They're not believable people and not trustworthy people. So anyway, and this is the way it's set up. And if a black person's word will never be taken above a white person's word, then again, Tom Robinson had no chance whatsoever of being successful in this trial. Let me get back to where I was today here. Yeah, right. So, back to point number one. It's Tom Robinson versus the Yules. And who's the jury going to believe? We already know that answer. They're going to believe the Yules. Let's put it this way. They may not believe them, but they are going to take the Yules' side. Because if they don't, that will be granting a black person equal justice, a sense of equality with a white person, and they could not abide by that. It could not be tolerated in that social system, in that class system. Again, I think I've mentioned this before. If they would grant a black person equality with a white person, whether it's their word, even though the white person is obviously telling a lie, they're never going to let the black person get the upper hand on a white person in a court of law. Because if they did that, the whites have just this feeling, this thought, okay, there goes our culture, there goes our society, there goes everything. We like the way things are set up here, and we like keeping the blacks invisible under that line, so we can't afford them any opportunity of equality. All right, second thing, once again, the jury, I have to believe that they know that the Yules are lying. In the last chapter we read, Atticus questioned Mayella Ewell directly, asked her this question: who beat you? Was it Tom Robinson or was it Bob Ewell? And that's the truth that everybody in town knows, including the members of this jury. They knew it was Bob Ewell who beat up his daughter, and Tom Robinson did not. He didn't. As we're going to find out in this chapter, basically he didn't lay a hand on her. If we believe Tom Robinson's story, and I do. But again, this is their sense of justice in Alabama, in the South, and during the Great Depression. The sense of justice is we got to keep things the way they are. We can't allow change to come into our society. Second thing I had up here, we were reading through this today, and I just had to stop my class. Atticus is cross-examining Tom Robinson, and he asked Tom, he says, did you ever, other than that one time that Mayella said that you came into the yard, came into the fence, are there other times that you came in as well? And Tom Robinson made this statement. He said, yes, sir, Mr. Finch, I went many times. So I just stopped my class there, and I lobbed him one, like a tennis. I just lobbed one over the net. I said, why do you think that Mayella had Tom Robinson come into the yard often? And a girl who sits right in front of where I'm sitting here, she raised her hand immediately. She goes, oh, she has a crush on Tom Robinson. Well, in a manner of speaking, that's the right answer. That was the answer I was looking for. And I quizzed them further. I pulled up the chart that I had about how society was arranged, and I said, so why is this bad? And of course, they were able to make the leap. They were able to make the conclusion. If a black man would ever even touch a white woman, he was in danger of being lynched. But you've got this on here: a white woman is making a play for a black woman, and what do you do with that? First of all, you go back to my chart, no white person is allowed to cross that line, and Mayella Ewell was simply crossing that line, as we'll get here to in a minute. She simply crossed the line, and it would have made her an outcast, more so than she is now, if she were caught. All right, so anyway, Mayella's premeditated actions to get Tom into the house. The first thing I said, she's continually inviting Tom Robinson into the yard. She's just looking for the opportunity. Secondly, again, premeditated. This was not a spur-of-the-moment issue. or thing that happened to Mayella Ewell and Tom Robinson. Mayella planned it all along. Who knows? I mean, at least for a year, more than a year. Because what did she do? Tom asked her. He said, "Why is it so quiet around here, Miss Mayella? Where are the children?" And what was her answer? "I sent them. They're all in town now. They're getting an ice cream." She said, "It took me a slap year." A slap year. It took her a whole year to get 7 quarters. So this thing had been planned in Mayella's mind for a long, long time. She had seen him walking, along the road. If you remember right, from one of Tom's first things that he talked to Atticus about on the witness stand, Atticus asked about the chifforobe, and he said, "That was over a year ago, Mr. Finch." All right. So she'd been working on this plan for over a year now. So it was a premeditated thing. All right. And then the story, as it of course goes along, she invited Tom into their house, which, I'm thinking of it in this day and age. I am never alone in my room with a girl, ever. If I'm here by myself and a girl walks in and puts her stuff down, I immediately walk out the door and I wait for other people to get in here before I come in. I used to run a club on Mondays called the Twilight Zone Club. I think I told you about this, where we watched 2 Twilight Zone episodes every Monday after school, and I had a couple of Mondays that I just had one person was going to come. It was a girl, and I said, "No, I can't today. I'm sorry. I'm not going to do it for just one." And I didn't tell her the reason necessarily. I wasn't going to be alone with a girl in my room. So anyway, this is a mistake, and from my standpoint, this is a mistake that Tom made. And yet, he couldn't, I'm not sure how much he could have avoided it. He went into the house alone. But I think when he figured out, when he first went in, I think he figured there was children in there. So he went into the house alone and is with Mayella. She asked, she got this bogus thing that she wanted him to work on. It was the hinges on the door. He looked at the door and it shut correctly. And he said, "There's nothing wrong with the door." She said, "Well, I want you to do one other thing. Up on top of that big old chifforobe up there, I want you to get the box down." So he got a chair, climbed on the chair, and as he was standing on the chair, she wrapped her arms around his legs. He said he got down, jumped down out of the chair, knocked the chair over. He said that was the only thing that was disturbed furniture-wise when he left. And when he got down, she jumped up on him and kissed him. And she said, "I've never kissed a man. I might as well be a black man." That's not what she said, but might as well be a black man. All right, this creates at that moment, Bob Ewell starts in on his rant from the window. I mean, part of their story was the truth. He did look through the window, and like I talked about yesterday, he was telling her, "Who beat you? Who did it? Who done it? Who done it?" It was him, because he wanted to get the story down. But anyway, Tom now faces a dilemma. He's only got a couple of options that he can do. He can either push Mayella and get out of there, but if he would push her and she might fall down and get bruised, whatever thing, a statement he made, he's a dead man at that point. Because if a black man touches a white woman, they take him out and they lynch him. All right? Or he can run away, which he did when Bob Ewell started yelling. He was as Tom said, Bob Ewell was only talking to Mayella, cussing at her and stuff like that. And Tom's only other option was to run away, which, as Scout pointed out in the text there, in the book there, that's a sure sign of guilt when you run away. Tom was in a no-win situation. If he stayed around until Bob Ewell came in the house, Bob Ewell may have had a gun. He may have just shot him, killed him, whatever, or tried to beat him up or whatever. Remember, Tom had one arm he couldn't even use. So anyway, again, it was a no-win situation for Tom Robinson. Whether he stayed or whether he left, there were no good choices. It's like choose your death. Which manner of death do you want to die by? Last thing is Mr. Gilmer's continuous disrespect and contempt for Tom. As you read through this chapter, if you read through this chapter, he kept on referring to, first of all, he says, whatever the sentence was, he said Robinson. He didn't call him Mr. Robinson. He didn't call him Tom Robinson or Tom. He just called him Robinson. But then throughout his grilling of Tom, he frequently ended his sentences with boy. All right, which growing up in our time, we know that it's a racial, has racial. It's not undertones. It's direct. Okay, it's a verbal. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. But anyway, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. He kept on calling him boy. Is that what you did, boy? Why did you run away, boy? Or sentences like that. And of course, those have that's racial slurs. That's what I was thinking of. Don't know why I couldn't think of that. Back in those days, that was considered a racial slur because Tom's a 25-year-old man, and Mr. Gilmer is calling him boy. Why did you run away, boy? Why didn't you stay, boy? What were you afraid of, boy? All right. I asked my students this in class today and left them scratching their head a little bit. I said, why did he keep on calling Tom Robinson boy? Who was he talking to? The answer is he wasn't necessarily. He was talking to Tom Robinson, but he kept on saying boy. He was pointing it out to the jury. He was reminding the jury, this is a black man on trial here, but it's just a black man, and you guys are going to find him guilty because he's a black man on trial against committing a crime against a white woman. But just so you remember, this is a black man. That's what, that's the subtext of what he was talking about there. That he's pointing out, he's just reinforcing in the minds of the jury, this is a black man. You will not find him, you will not acquit him. You will not find him innocent. He's a black man whose word is being taken. You've got to compare it to the words of two white people, a white man and a white woman. And of course, this is a black man, so you're going to find him guilty. So anyway, that was what that was all about. Of course, at the end of this, Dill got all upset. He didn't like the way Mr. Gilmer was talking to Tom Robinson. And he went out and he was crying and everything. At the very end of this chapter, Dolphus Raymond comes into the picture here, and we're going to get a slightly different picture of Dolphus Raymond in the reading tomorrow. So that's all I've got here. I thank you once again. Thank you for joining me. I will talk to you tomorrow, and of course, again, I hope tomorrow's a better day than today. Thanks.